Well, good afternoon. This is Kathleen Dudley coming again from northeastern New Mexico. I have another Substack writing that I wanted to read and record, and you can see these postings on my Substack page at Kathleen Dudley. This particular writing is called the Grimoire of Words and has come about as a result of all the confusion, the lack of knowledge, and the basic dumbing down through our education system and the use of artificial intelligence, which is further dumbing us down. So here we go, the Grimoire of Words. Written January of 2026. Words are language. Hold the power for communication. Communication that is intended to bring about clarity and further connectedness between men, women, and children. Confucius saw that it was seriously flawed among the people of his time. That was 25 centuries ago. Imagine the difficulty today with all the technological instruments that replace our verbal exchanges, limiting eye contact, physical gestures, not to speak of intonation and the immediacy of an interruption to correct or change the direction of the communication. Today, kids sit next to one another and text back and forth rather than talk and exchange thoughts and ideas, increasing their verbal and social skills. Entire exchanges take place through text messages instead of meeting in a physical location together with a friend. Emails replace telephone calls, and WhatsApp becomes the family meeting place where no physical exchanges of hugs or kisses with our beloved occur. The days of meeting for tea and coffee to talk with friends and family is being replaced with the digital tapping of messages on cell phones or computers. Heads down, necks bent, the scrying mirror has replaced looking into one another's eyes and hearing their voices while deforming the bone structure of our youth. This is normal today in 2026. This normalization is breaking down the very fabric of humanity, removing gatherings, physical touching, sensing one another through the sound of heartbeats, recognition through scent, and the immediacy of the energy of the other before us. This shift in societies is so recent, it's so new, there is still an awe about the mystery of the technology to the user, and no warning of the harms. Consider the shortcuts used in texting, truncating the spelling and certainly limiting the breadth and choice of language, not to speak of the mind's own diminished knowledge. Ultimately, rewiring our ability to write words, to speak, to thoroughly use our own linguistic skills that for centuries has been rich in words that today are but a paltry sum of the breadth of our own diminishing vocabulary. This is not a loss specific to any one language or nation, but a worldwide loss to language and communication in general, ultimately dumbing us down, collapsing our abilities rather than expanding our human capacity to communicate with the beauty and specificity of our languages. Our ability to communicate has become redefined through technology that excludes the human experience through which humanity has evolved. Only these past 2 decades have we experienced this absorption into the world of a small handheld screen that we carry with us every awakened hour and through which we are taught to define our world, our existence. This fixation, addiction, owns us whether we accept this or not. Life without our cell phones is no life at all for most people. And what we are discovering in this short aftermath is that life with a cell phone diminishes the quality of our life exponentially, leaving us ultimately little quality of life in a newly defined artificial realm. COVID forced this change at a massive speed and intensity when mandates to stay at home taught a new fear of others. By ramping up lies about contagious germs, the viruses that have never been isolated, let alone proven to exist. But the fear spellbound messages gripped the world. and in compensation, glued one populace after another to their computers and cell phones in order to cope with the separation from family and friends. Lies became built upon lies, and fear grew. I recall the day in the 1960s when the new shiny black wall-mounted dial phone replaced the ring-up phone in our home. No longer would we talk to Hazel McIntyre, the local switchboard operator in our small rural Alberta town. And the day I surrendered my black Bakelite dial phone for a sleek beige plastic plush push button version in the 1990s still haunts me. It was in 2013 that I purchased my first cell phone, and 6 years later threw it away and left the world of cell phone addiction and text messaging behind, recommitting to the familiar world of dial-up landlines with hardwired protective Ethernet cables and a Wi-Fi-less home environment. The jingle, "Reach Out and Touch Someone" by Pacific Northwest telephone company Ma Bell in 1979, was a marketer's immediate success, intended to divert away from the corporate monopoly's grip with an impact unsuspected and unimagined. Within 2 decades, mass-marketed cellular phone sales reached 295 million subscribers on 3G networks worldwide, and 4.69 billion people today, with Americans spending 5 hours and 16 minutes communicating day in and day out. For a tool initially used primarily for business, the phone became the ubiquitous tool of leisure behavior. It has become the new snacking that transformed body sizes and behaviors with the introduction of snack food, leading to obesity, addiction, prediabetes, and a diabetic epidemic for those snacking all day long. The conveniences sold to the public have a nefarious impact, always unsuspected and devastating to the mental, physical, and emotional welfare of the people, always marketed for their improved quality of living, with hidden and dangerous agendas. There is a sense of relief, a sense of exclusion, a sense of wonderment wrapped up in rejecting the world of technology. AI and its dumbing down of our language and our very minds frees me to continue to think without its artificiality directing me. The lack of stolen time from a myriad text messages and the obsessive number of phone calls, the handy handheld communication device the cell phone promotes. This new freedom opens hours for reading, handheld books, and writing. Although I have abandoned the lost art of pen on paper and today use my desktop computer keypad, even this creates a disconnect from my own heart, soul, and mind, which is less rich in tone and emotion, and noticeably so when reading the pages. I think about words because I have time to contemplate their power and meaning. The grimoire of words. For centuries, words have been cast with double meanings. It is up to the discerning to know and understand this twisting of language. It is not unlike 2 sets of accounting books used by those whose intention is to avoid the very laws they write and enforce in order to encumber the masses. And along with this is the nefarious aspect of language used to twist and harm unsuspecting common people who live their lives without contemplating what ultimately enslaves and redirects their life goals. Those writing and controlling the printing of textbooks, of school curricula, control what we read and therefore what we learn through books and study. Publishing houses today spend vast amounts of money changing written text by writers whose warnings heed those wanting to know why things are so confused and upside down. Publishers like Omnia Veritas and their cohorts across the world market republished works of Ezra Pound, Eustace Mullins, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, riddled with obfuscation in order to achieve their ends. It is not enough for the author themselves to live through the harms at the hands of the assailants, The manipulation of these and other authors' writings obviously threaten the narrative of lies and must be silenced one way or another. There are words that have a Pavlovian knee-jerk response coupled with a B.F. Skinner behaviorism foisted upon children in government schooling. This public schooling incorporates intentional redirection of history written by the victors and therefore the powerful, unconscious response from those whose minds have been captured and molded in order to keep a false narrative of our ancestors alive. Over the past 5 years, I have heard specific words used in ways that confound me, opposing ways, incorrect and ignorant ways, twisted, and yet each use holds a common denominator of reaction and blinding belief, with the user expressing cognitive dissonance when questioned. Most folks do not actually look beyond the surface of what words or headlines in the news are claiming, but parrot what they hear or read with nary a thought to its accuracy, let alone its meaning. Buoyed up with a self-importance for their brilliance to repeat something they heard, yet having no clue of what it correctly means. Analysis, discernment, inquisitiveness, and curiosity are labeled today as part of the makeup of a conspiracy theorist, a CIA term coined and marketed in the 1960s to further harm the presence and prevalence of truth. When in actuality, these actions and behaviors represent an educated mind that demands analysis before accepting the so-called facts presented to them. We know that the mainstream media has been in the hands of a few who control the narrative and determine what we read and see through radio, television, newspapers, books, movies, online feeds, and public platforms. This control continues to brainwash those who accept the programming without question, unable to discern truth from the mass fiction. It is this fictionalized world of chaos and the theatrical staging that convinces the masses that it is real. Yet even with the technology of their cell phones that gives them the control to so-called communicate with family and friends, they fail to comprehend the nefarious side of this tool. Being a part of a technology connects them implicitly to the destruction. To this they are addicted, unable to discern, to analyze, or live real lives in the here and now. 20 years ago, their world changed, and today live with less thoughtfulness, discernment, and originality than ever, responding to artificial dopamine hits for distraction and fictional happiness. I point out some words that are grossly misunderstood and twisted intentionally, that grimoire of words put before us to blind us, to enslave us, to confuse and distract us. We are judged, we are excluded, laughed at and jeered at, imprisoned for comprehending the exactness and historical knowledge of language. Socrates was murdered in ancient Greece by his own government for teaching the truth of self-reflection and empowerment of knowing the inner workings of oneself, a threat to those who govern. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was imprisoned in the Soviet Gulag for questioning the actions of communist revolutionary political leader Joseph Stalin in his written exchange with a fellow comrade. American-born Ezra Pound, the literary giant whose protégés Ernest Hemingway, T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, and Robert Frost awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, wrote and spoke out against the communist regime at the hands of the Bolsheviks while he witnessed this ideological threat spread from Russia across Europe. For this he was labeled fascist, imprisoned, tortured, and held without a trial for 13 years by his own government. Words, the power of words, and the freedom and protection of the First Amendment. The Constitution of the United States of America and its Bill of Rights protecting Americans since its inception in 1791. Words that took lives imprisoned 25 centuries ago and before. Words that riled the mighty tyrants whose dictates served few and murdered countless. Words that capture truth and expose lies. The arsenal at the hands of the orator and writer, from ancient to present, protected under the freedom of speech, a thin veil then and today, but alive in our hearts and dreams. These words continue to create and extend the truth or repeat the lies until we stop, listen, reflect, study, and unpack what we have unconsciously accepted without thoughtfulness, without discernment, without using our minds, without emotion, but with an openness to learning, to wisdom, to a world uncontrolled, but free for us to maneuver and discover the beauty of truth of both our past and present. How many folks truly have taken a moment or two to study the meanings and read about the history of words bandied about, that they parrot and become emotionally charged through their Pavlovian response? How many read these words and experience an entire story in their minds unfold, complete with condemnation, names, time periods, and a vile sense in their own hearts? Without understanding, no positive discourse can be had, and no learning from one another. When using words that are loaded that we do not understand, either their meanings or origins, we become mouthpieces for the master. This perpetuates the further enslavement by globalists by doing its bidding, by continuing the rat's nest of confusion. Sun Tzu claimed that in order to win the battle, we must know whom we are fighting. The enemy must be named, and it is imperative to align with our side of the battle in this war against humanity. In order to fully understand a word, we must know its etymology, the study of the origin of the word, its cultural beginnings and usage, and the principles and philosophies that are embodied within each word. There are but two words to unpack here. These I hear daily, incorrectly, cited by folks who should know better, but are apparently too lazy or indoctrinated to learn the actual meaning to then use correctly. This might cause a hellstorm of reflection that could challenge the entire platform upon which one lives. According to Eustace Mullins, the clear meaning of communism has been intentionally obscured, and, quote, "You will not find the one sentence which will explain communism," unquote. Have you ever noticed this? He goes on to say, quote, "What are the principles of communism? First of all, communism is international in scope. It denies the principle of nationalism. Second, communism denies Jesus and his love for the individual. It also denies the principle of salvation of the soul, which is the basis of all Christian belief. Third, communism denies to the individual all human rights, such as private property, a voice in the government, or the right to question the authority of the collective state. These, then, are the fundamental principles of communism. One should not be surprised, then, to find a Jew, Karl Marx, is the father of the philosophy of communism," unquote. The Communist Manifesto was published in 1848 by Karl Marx. By 1917, the Bolsheviks had toppled the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty, removed the last Russian Tsar, and threatened the spread of communism through Europe. Is it any wonder that Benito Mussolini of Italy, Francesco Franco of Spain, and Adolf Hitler of Germany, all leaders of Christian countries, fought fervently against this ideology that threatened their people's freedom of religion, of ownership of private property, of values of family, individuality, the soul, and sovereignty? Yet we are ignorant of these facts and the truth behind the communist spread that incorporates the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto in every government today across the world, including the United States of America. Is it any surprise that the Constitution and its Bill of Rights have been nearly completely dismantled and destroyed, particularly under the direction of the last 2 presidents of the corporatized, soulless, godless United States? During an interview in 1967 with Canadian politician, writer, journalist Adrian Arcand, Mr. Arcand defines fascism and compares it to communism. Fascism, according to Archon, is the antithesis of communism in all principles. Mr. Archon's knowledge of both ideologies brings to light with simplicity the correctness of both words. Two polarized ideologies thoughtlessly bandied about like meaningless words, while powder kegs of black magic behind mass confusion. Grimoire at its ultimate. There is no need henceforth to claim ignorance or to abuse the proper use of these words, making discourse with others a learning experience rather than a meltdown of confusion and distraction, unless fully intentional. And I leave you with a few salient words for further self-investigation and reflection, because without knowing their true etiology, and therefore meanings, not unlike communism and fascism, they are weaponized and used against us all. Race, racism. Nation, nationalism. Tyrant, socialism. Dictator, despot. Proletariat, bourgeois. Aristocrat, National Socialism. Semitic, pagan, Pagani. Please see me at Kathleen Dudley at Substack. Thank you.